Dr. Keth-9 had performed exactly 4,847 neural scans in her career, and not once had a quantum neural scanner asked if the subject had personally witnessed the heat death of their homeworld twice. The machine was clearly malfunctioning. She tapped 4 of her 6 arms against the console in the rhythm that usually convinced temperamental equipment to behave. The scanner continued projecting holographic error messages that shouldn't exist in any programming language she recognized. Subject exhibits temporal survival paradox markers, the machine announced in its perfectly neutral tone. Query: has subject outlived complete biosphere collapse on multiple occasions? That's not a real question, Keth-9 muttered, though she had to admit the readings were fascinating in their impossibility. Zvex, are you getting this? Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. Zvex of 7 crystalline facets rotated his geometric form to better observe the holographic display. Being a Genth archivist meant he'd cataloged the death throes of 847 civilizations, and he'd never encountered readings quite this baffling. The quantum resonance pattern suggests the subject has experienced planetary sterilization events, he chimed, his voice creating harmonic overtones that made the air itself seem contemplative. Multiple times, which is, of course, impossible. The subject in question, Expedition Leader Vale, sat in the scanning chair with the sort of relaxed posture that made everyone else unconsciously nervous. She appeared to be examining her fingernails, while their most sophisticated scientific equipment questioned the fundamental nature of her existence. Is this going to take much longer? She asked, not looking up. I have a debriefing to attend. Dr. Keth-9 found herself studying the human with renewed interest. Vale had joined their multi-species research expedition 3 months ago as a liaison from Earth's diplomatic corps. She'd been professionally competent, disturbingly calm under pressure, and remarkably uninformative about her background whenever anyone asked. Which, now that Keth-9 thought about it, had been somewhat odd. Most species loved talking about themselves. Vraxians could discuss their evolutionary adaptations for hours. Genth would lecture anyone within range about their crystalline matrix formation processes. Even the Nom, who existed as sentient gas clouds, enjoyed describing the philosophical implications of their atmospheric consciousness. Humans, in Keth-9's experience, were usually the worst for oversharing. They'd tell you about their childhood pets, their romantic disappointments, and their opinions on proper sandwich construction within minutes of meeting you. Vale, however, deflected personal questions with the skill of someone who'd had considerable practice. The scanner emitted a sound that Keth-9 was fairly certain wasn't supposed to be in its vocal repertoire. Something between a confused whimper and a dying processing unit. Subject's neural patterns indicate survival of the following extinction-level events, it announced, then began listing items that made increasingly less sense. Impact winter lasting 47,000 standard years. Volcanic winter lasting 23,000 standard years. Multiple glaciation events spanning 400,000 standard years. Global ecosystem collapse due to atmospheric oxygen depletion. Mass extinction due to... That's enough, Vale said quietly. The scanner stopped mid-sentence. Every piece of equipment in the room fell silent. Even the background hum of the ship's life support systems seemed to pause. Dr. Keth-9 realized she was holding her breath and couldn't remember when she'd stopped breathing normally. The machine is clearly experiencing some kind of cascade failure, offered Jorem Who Flows Between Stars, the Nom philosopher whose gaseous form had been hovering near the ceiling throughout the procedure. His voice carried the thoughtful quality that came from having no physical vocal cords and therefore being forced to modulate atmospheric pressure to communicate. Perhaps we should postpone this scan until the equipment can be properly calibrated. The equipment is fine, Vale said, still not looking at any of them. It's just asking the wrong questions. The scanner hummed back to life. Clarification. Are the listed survival events personally experienced by the subject, or culturally inherited trauma patterns from ancestral memory? Both, Vale replied. Dr. Keth-9's 6 arms stopped their nervous tapping simultaneously. In her extensive experience, subjects didn't typically respond to malfunctioning equipment. They especially didn't give answers that made the equipment malfunction worse. That's impossible, Zvex chimed, his crystalline surfaces refracting light in patterns that indicated deep confusion. No individual can personally survive multiple extinction events. The temporal scale alone. The scanner seems to think otherwise, Vale pointed out reasonably. The machine was now producing readings that violated several fundamental principles of xenobiology. According to the display, Vale's neural patterns contained memory structures that extended back roughly 300,000 standard years, which would make her approximately 299,950 years older than the oldest recorded member of any known species. This is ridiculous, Dr. Keth-9 said, though she found herself studying the readings with growing fascination. Humans have a documented lifespan of less than 100 years. Your species has only achieved interstellar travel within the last century. You've only had written language for a few thousand years. Have we? Vale asked mildly. The question hung in the air like an unexploded device. Dr. Keth-9 realized that, despite months of collaboration, she'd never actually asked Vale about human history. She'd simply assumed that their databases were accurate. After all, Earth had been thoroughly surveyed, catalogued, and deemed a typical late-stage, developing world. Nothing unusual there. The archaeological record is quite clear, Zvex stated, with the confidence of someone who'd spent centuries organizing the deaths of civilizations into neat chronological categories. Humans achieved spaceflight 94 years ago, radio communication 127 years ago, agricultural development approximately 10,000 years ago. Before that, primitive hunter-gatherer societies with no permanent settlements or advanced technology. Vale said, which wasn't really agreement, but wasn't disagreement either. The scanner chose that moment to emit what could only be described as an electronic scream. New error messages began cascading across the holographic display, each more impossible than the last. Warning: subject exhibits post-extinction adaptation markers inconsistent with known evolutionary timelines. Warning: neural patterns suggest technological sophistication predating current galactic civilization by 200,000 standard years. Warning: memory structures indicate survival of cosmic events not yet recorded in imperial scientific databases. Dr. Keth-9 stared at the display, then at Vale, then back at the display. This is completely insane. Is it? Vale asked, and for the first time since the scan began, she looked directly at Dr. Keth-9. Her expression was perfectly pleasant and absolutely terrifying in its casual certainty. Or have you just been asking the wrong questions? The scanner's final message appeared in letters that pulsed with urgency. Primary query unresolved. How many times has this subject species recovered from complete planetary sterilization? Vale smiled. It was not a particularly reassuring expression. Would you like the short version or the long version? She asked. 20 minutes later, Dr. Keth-9 was seriously considering requesting a transfer to a nice, predictable stellar cartography mission. Preferably one that didn't involve humans casually rewriting the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Vale had chosen the long version. The Toba eruption was particularly inconvenient, she was saying, perched on the edge of the examination table, while Zvex frantically cross-referenced her statements against the Imperial Archaeological Database. Dropped global temperatures by 6 degrees for about a decade. Most of the population didn't make it, but enough survived in caves and coastal areas to rebuild. Again. "This is preposterous," Jorim declared, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. "The Toba supervolcano erupted 74,000 years ago, according to your own planetary geological records. No member of your species was alive to witness it." "Weren't we?" Vale asked with genuine curiosity. "How do you know?" Zvex's crystalline surfaces flickered as he processed search results. "Because your species only evolved 200,000 years ago and didn't develop advanced cognition until approximately 50,000 years ago. It's documented." "By whom?" The question created an uncomfortable silence. Dr. Keth-9 realized she'd never actually questioned the source of their xenoarchaeological data on human development. The surveys had been conducted by the hegemony's research divisions, using standard protocols, analyzing standard evidence. Nothing controversial there. "Fossil records," Zvex said with somewhat less certainty than before. "Genetic analysis? Technological artifact dating." "Ah," Vale nodded. "And you found these where, exactly?" "In the standard archaeological sites. Caves, burial grounds, ancient settlements." Zvex stopped mid-chime. "Wait. Something's wrong with these search results." Dr. Keith-9 watched the archivist's form dim as he processed information that apparently contradicted itself. "What kind of wrong?" "The database shows 847 documented extinction events on Earth over the past 500,000 years. But it also shows evidence of technological civilization existing before, during, and after each event. This shouldn't be possible unless the same civilization kept coming back." Vale finished helpfully. "Civilizations don't just come back from extinction," Dr. Keth-9 protested. "They end. That's what makes them extinct." "Do they?" Vale hopped down from the table and walked over to the specimen display cases lining the laboratory walls. She stopped in front of a case containing artifacts from their most recent planetary survey. A world that had been sterilized by gamma radiation approximately 50,000 years ago. "These tools look familiar." Dr. Kith-9 peered at the display. The artifacts were crude stone implements, clearly from a pre-industrial society. "Those are from Kepler 442b. The indigenous population was wiped out by their star's gamma-ray burst. We found these in the ruins." "And when did you date them to?" "Approximately 1,000 years after the sterilization event, obviously from a different species that evolved later." Vale tapped the glass case. "Those are human-made tools." The statement hit the room like a decompression breach. Dr. Keth-9 stared at the stone artifacts, then at Vale, then at the artifacts again. "That's impossible. Humans have never been to Kepler 442b." "Haven't we?" Vale moved to the next case, which contained metal fragments from a civilization that had been obliterated by an asteroid impact 75,000 years ago. "This alloy composition is identical to early human metallurgy. And this one," she gestured to a third case, "those symbols match proto-human writing systems that supposedly didn't develop until 30,000 years later." Zvex was now cycling through search results so rapidly that his crystalline form was creating a strobing light effect. "This can't be right." According to these cross-references, human artifacts have been found on 127 worlds across the spiral arm. Most of them are worlds that experienced total biosphere collapse before humans achieved interstellar travel. "How inconvenient for your timeline," Vale observed. Dr. Keth-9 felt something cold settling in her stomach. She'd spent the last 15 years cataloging the remains of dead civilizations. Her entire career was built on the fundamental assumption that extinction meant ending. Species died, civilizations fell, and eventually, given enough time, new species evolved to take their place. You're suggesting that humans have been spreading across the galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years, she said slowly. Long before you developed spaceflight. Long before you should have been capable of interstellar travel. I'm not suggesting anything, Vale replied. I'm just pointing out that your evidence might be telling you something different than what you assumed it was telling you. Jorim's atmospheric pressure fluctuated in what his species considered a sign of deep philosophical distress. But the genetic bottlenecks, the evolutionary evidence, every time your species experiences a near-extinction event, your genetic diversity drops to almost nothing. You rebuild from tiny populations. Yes. That's not how advanced civilizations survive catastrophes. They develop technology, space travel, backup colonies. They don't nearly go extinct and then rebuild from scratch using primitive tools. Don't they? Dr. Keth9 found herself studying the human with new eyes. Vale's casual certainty about impossible things was starting to feel less like ignorance and more like knowledge she didn't have access to. The Permian extinction, she said suddenly. 250 million years ago. It killed 96% of all marine life and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates. Nothing intelligent could have survived that. Nothing? Vale asked mildly. The fossil record shows no evidence of advanced life forms surviving the Permian extinction. The fossil record shows what's left behind. It doesn't necessarily show what walked away. Zvex made a sound like breaking crystal. These database searches are returning results that violate basic evolutionary theory. According to this, human genetic markers appear in fossil records from periods when your homeworld was supposedly uninhabitable. But that would mean that we were there, Vale said. Living in environments that should have killed us, rebuilding civilizations that should have stayed dead, spreading to other worlds using methods that shouldn't have existed. Dr. Keth9 realized her 4 hands were trembling slightly. How long have humans been doing this? Doing what? Refusing to stay extinct. Vale's expression grew thoughtful. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Most of us would probably say we're just very good at adapting. Adaptation doesn't explain how you survived the heat death of multiple ecosystems. Doesn't it? What exactly do you think adaptation means? The question hung in the air while 3 alien scientists contemplated the possibility that their understanding of extinction, evolution, and the basic nature of survival might be fundamentally incorrect. Outside, though, laboratories' viewports, stars wheeled past in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the growing realization that one species had been playing by different rules than everyone else. The real question, Vale said quietly, isn't how we survived. It's what we learned along the way. The strategic planning chamber aboard the Convergence had been designed to facilitate calm, rational discourse among the galaxy's most advanced minds. Its ambient lighting responded to stress levels, its acoustic dampening eliminated outside distractions, and its holographic displays could render complex data in formats comprehensible to 17 different sensory modalities. None of this was helping. Explain to me again why humans are living in the Vale Nebula, Commander Theska demanded, her 4 optical organs fixed on the tactical display with the sort of intensity usually reserved for imminent catastrophes. Dr. Keth9 manipulated the hologram with 2 arms, while using her other 4 to frantically input search queries. The Vale Nebula was sterilized by a hypernova 3,000 years ago. Nothing should be able to survive there. The radiation levels alone would cook most organic matter in minutes. And yet, Zvex chimed, his harmonics creating discordant notes that made everyone's teeth ache. Our long-range sensors detected 17 human settlements thriving in the nebula's core regions. They're not just surviving the radiation, they're using it to power some kind of industrial complex we can't identify. Vale sat at the far end of the conference table, methodically working her way through a bowl of synthesized fruit, while 36 of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists slowly descended into panic. She'd been remarkably unhelpful during the past 4 hours of increasingly frantic research, offering only the occasional or interesting theory when presented with evidence that their understanding of basic physics might be incomplete. The Centauri incident, Commander Theska continued, cycling through reports that made less sense with each entry. Human colonists established a thriving trade hub on Proxima Centauri C exactly 7 months after a coronal mass ejection stripped away the planet's atmosphere. Our xenobiology texts clearly state that atmospheric loss equals biosphere collapse equals extinction. Always. Not always, apparently, muttered Dr. Yenth Cole, the expedition's senior physicist, who had spent the morning discovering that several fundamental constants might not be as constant as previously believed. The humans on Proxima C aren't even wearing environmental suits. They're breathing an atmosphere that shouldn't exist. How are they breathing an atmosphere that shouldn't exist? Demanded Jorim, whose gaseous form had compressed into an agitated spiral near the ceiling. Vale looked up from her fruit. Carefully. The response triggered what could only be described as collective xenobiological hysteria. Dr. Keth 9 watched her. Colleagues, beings who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe's rational principles, confront the possibility that one species had been casually violating those principles for hundreds of millennia. The Kepler 186 system, Dr. Yenth Cole announced, his voice carrying the strained quality of someone whose world view was undergoing rapid structural collapse. 5 planets, all 5 were rendered uninhabitable by their star's transition to a red giant phase approximately 50,000 years ago. Surface temperatures exceeded 500 degrees. Oceans boiled away. Atmospheric composition became toxic to all known life forms. And? Vale asked with mild interest. Human settlements on all 5 worlds. Current population approximately 2.3 million across the system. They've somehow managed to terraform planets that were completely sterilized by stellar evolution. That's not terraforming, Svex corrected, his crystalline structure flickering with confusion. Terraforming requires extensive technological infrastructure, atmospheric processors, decades of careful environmental modification. These settlements appeared practically overnight after the sterilization events ended. Vale finished her fruit and leaned back in her chair. Has anyone considered that maybe your definitions are incomplete? What do you mean? Commander Theska asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely certain she wanted to know. You keep using words like impossible and extinction and sterilization, as if they mean the same thing to everyone. What if they don't? Dr. Keth 9 felt a creeping suspicion that they were approaching something far more disturbing than simple scientific revision. Are you saying that humans have redefined extinction? I'm saying that maybe extinction has always been more flexible than you assumed. The holographic display flickered as Dr. Yenth Cole input new search parameters. Cross-referencing all recorded human contact events with galactic catastrophe databases. Results are unprecedented. The Strategic Planning Chamber's main screen lit up with a 3-dimensional map of their spiral arm. Red markers indicated known extinction-level events over the past 300,000 years. Blue markers showed documented human presence. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Every single red marker was surrounded by blue ones. Humans had been present before, during, and after every major catastrophic event in their local galactic region. They appeared in star systems shortly after supernovae, established colonies on worlds recently scoured by gamma-ray bursts, and maintained thriving civilizations in regions that should have been uninhabitable for thousands of years. "This isn't survival," Commander Theska said quietly. "This is something else entirely." "What would you call it?" Vale asked. "I don't know. Opportunism? Parasitism? Some kind of cosmic predation pattern?" Vale's expression grew thoughtful. "Those are interesting theories." "What? Evidence do you have to support them?" The question created another uncomfortable silence. Dr. Keth-9 realized that despite hours of research, they hadn't found any evidence of humans causing catastrophic events. They'd only found evidence of humans being present when catastrophic events occurred. "The timing could be coincidental," Dr. Yenthkol suggested weakly. "Could be," Vale agreed. "How many coincidences would you need to see before you started looking for alternative explanations?" Zvex's harmonics dropped to frequencies that barely registered as sound. According to these calculations, the probability of humans coincidentally arriving at 2,847 recently sterilized worlds across 300,000 years approaches mathematical impossibility. Unless what? Jorim asked. Unless they weren't arriving. Unless they were already there. The implication hit the room like a gravitational wave. Dr. Keth-9 stared at the tactical display, watching red and blue markers pulse in patterns that suggested something far more complex than random distribution. "You're saying humans have been everywhere," she said slowly. "For hundreds of thousands of years. Just waiting." "I'm not saying anything," Vale replied. "But if that were true, what do you think they might have been waiting for?" Commander Theska's optical organs focused on the human, with the sort of attention usually reserved for potential threats. "What happens when the waiting ends?" Vale smiled, and this time there was nothing reassuring about it at all. "I suppose we'll find out soon enough." The quantum neural scanner had been redesigned, recalibrated, and blessed by 3 different technology priests from the Engineering Guild. Dr. Keth-9 was taking no chances with the second attempt at scanning Vale's neural patterns. This time she wanted answers that made sense. The universe, as it turned out, had different plans. "Subject exhibits causality markers inconsistent with linear temporal experience," the scanner announced, its voice carrying an almost accusatory tone. "Primary query: does subject exist as catalyst or consequence of observed extinction patterns?" Vale settled into the scanning chair with the same casual ease she'd shown 6 hours earlier, before their understanding of cosmic order had been thoroughly dismantled. "That's a better question." "How is that a better question?" Dr. Keth-9 demanded, all 6 arms working frantically to interpret readings that seemed designed to mock the concept of scientific method. "It doesn't make sense. Causality doesn't work like that." "Doesn't it?" Commander Theska leaned against the laboratory wall with the posture of someone who'd abandoned hope of rational discourse. The past few hours had revealed that human presence preceded galactic disasters, with such consistency that coincidence had become statistically impossible. What they hadn't determined was whether humans were harbingers, survivors, or something else entirely. "The scanner's asking if you cause extinction events," she said bluntly, "or if extinction events cause you." "Both premises assume causation flows in only one direction," Vale pointed out. "What if that assumption is wrong?" The machine emitted a series of harmonic pulses that Dr. Keth-9 had never heard before. "Subject's neural architecture suggests experiential familiarity with temporal recursion patterns. Query: has subject personally experienced causality loops involving species-level survival events?" "Define personally," Vale replied. The scanner paused for exactly 3.7 seconds, long enough for everyone in the room to realize it was actually considering the question. Individual consciousness maintaining continuity across multiple extinction recovery cycles, it finally answered. Oh, in that case, yes. Dr. Yenth Cole, who had been reviewing atmospheric composition data from human settlements, dropped his data pad. You're claiming to have lived through multiple extinction events. Personally. As the same individual. I'm not claiming anything. I'm answering the machine's questions. That would make you hundreds of thousands of years old. Would it? Vale asked with genuine curiosity. How do you calculate age when time doesn't flow linearly? The question created the sort of silence usually associated with the moment before catastrophic system failures. Dr. Keth-9 realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in xenobiological research. A subject who was more interested in examining her examiners than in being examined. You're suggesting that humans experience time differently than other species, Jorim said, his gaseous form contracting into tight spirals of agitation. I'm suggesting that time might experience humans differently than it experiences other species. The scanner's next query bypassed all pretense of scientific protocol. Are humans a stable temporal phenomenon or a recurring cosmic anomaly? Yes. Dr. Keth-9 stared at the readouts, which now resembled abstract art more than scientific data. That's not an answer to a binary question. Isn't it? What if the question is based on a false dichotomy? You can't be both stable and anomalous. Can't you? What if stability is the anomaly? Commander Theska pushed herself away from the wall, her optical organs fixed on Vale with the intensity of someone who just realized they might be in significant danger. The pattern we discovered, humans appearing before, during, and after catastrophic events across the galaxy. It's not coincidence, and it's not conquest. It's something else. What would you call it? Vale asked, echoing her question from hours earlier, but with an entirely different context. Gardening, Commander Theska said quietly. You're gardening on a galactic scale. The scanner erupted in a cascade of affirmative signals. Hypothesis confirmed. Subject species exhibits behavioral patterns consistent with ecosystem management across temporal spatial scales exceeding standard evolutionary parameters. Vale nodded approvingly. That's closer to accurate. You're managing galactic evolution, Dr. Keth-9 said, the words feeling strange in her mouth. Guiding which species survive catastrophes, ensuring that someone is always there to rebuild when civilizations collapse. We prefer to think of it as preventing waste. Waste of what? Potential. Vale stood up from the scanning chair, apparently finished with being examined. Do you know how many interesting ideas die when civilizations collapse? How many beautiful art forms disappear when species go extinct? How many problems go unsolved when everyone who might have solved them is dead? Dr. Yenthkol was frantically inputting calculations. The mathematical requirements for this kind of temporal management would be enormous. You'd need to predict cosmic events, coordinate responses across multiple timelines, maintain continuity of consciousness across hundreds of thousands of years. You'd need to be very good at not staying dead, Vale agreed. But why? Jorim asked. Why take responsibility for every catastrophe, every extinction, every cosmic disaster? Why not just build a safe civilization somewhere and stay there? Vale paused at the laboratory door, considering the question. Have you ever watched a garden grow? Gardens don't grow, Svex chimed with confusion. Gardens are cultivated. Exactly, Vale said, and walked out. The quantum neural scanner powered down automatically, its final message appearing in letters that pulsed with satisfied certainty. Scan complete. Subject classification. Gardener. Threat level. Dependent on observer's definition of weed. Dr. Keth-9 stared at the empty doorway, then at her colleagues, then at the scanner's final message. Outside the laboratory, the Convergence continued its journey through space, carrying a crew that had just discovered they were traveling with someone who considered galactic civilization to be a hobby project, requiring occasional maintenance. She wondered, with the sort of detached curiosity that comes after complete worldview collapse, whether their expedition to study primitive worlds had been their idea at all, or whether someone had simply decided it was time for them to learn something new about the nature of survival. The scanner's message flickered once more before disappearing. Addendum: recommend reconsidering definition of primitive. Dr. Keth-9 decided she definitely needed that transfer to stellar cartography. Stars, at least, had the courtesy to follow predictable patterns. Unlike humans, who apparently treated the universe like a garden that occasionally needed weeding.